Why don't you introduce yourself, tell the people who you are?
I'm Domino from the Hieroglyphics.
So I'm sitting here with you and we're just talking about how a lot of the stuff that producers do gets done behind closed doors, doesn't get a lot of shine. So, you know, in this game where a lot of people do it for recognition and do it for exposure, what keeps you being the man behind the boards, the man behind the scenes?
Well, you know, I love hip hop. You know, I love music. Music is my sanctuary, as the great Gary Bartz once said. But, you know, I just, it's in me. And so, you know, it's what I do. And I got associated with a crew of talented MCs that always give me reason to, you know, create, because I know that they will be able to bless it in a way that almost no one else can. And so, you know, it's, you know, like with anything, you know, if you're passionate about it, whether or not you get paid for it, you're gonna continue to do it. You know, if it's really in you. And hip hop and producing hip hop for me is, you know, it's almost like part of my DNA. And so I'm always, you know, I listen to songs as a producer, any song that's on, you know. And so, you know, I always say that most people who produce music, particularly when it comes to sampling, we listen to music different than the average person. You know, I feel like I listen to music in layers. And so when I'm listening to a song, I can listen to this level, I can listen to this bass line, I can listen to this snare, I can listen to how the hi-hat is going, I can listen to the guitar lick, and whether there's two guitars, one on one side and one on another side, I listen to all these different elements as I'm listening to a song. And so I'll point out to, like, you know, somebody who isn't producer or isn't really into music like that, and they love music, and I'll be like, I really like how there's that cool effect on his voice, and they'll be like, what effect? You know. And so I think that's you know, that's, you know, like I said, being a producer's in you, you're gonna always you're gonna always do it.
Right, it's like a second nature kind of thing. So, you know, something that I'm curious about is like someone that's, you know, trying to study hip hop and learn the history of it. It's just really interesting to me to think about like those days or like those years kind of leading up to the 90s, especially out west. Like what, like when we're like talking about like 1985, 1986, 1987, 8, like what does hip hop look like on the West Coast? Like, what does hip hop mean? Is there even a name attached to it at that point? Like, can you speak to that at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, at that point, if you're talking about 85, 86, I think hip hop had gotten enough exposure that most people kind of knew that it existed. But if you're talking about earlier, because first time I heard hip hop was I heard Rapper's Delight on the radio. And so, like, that's 79. And so, like, and there was a time, and I was telling this story to a friend of mine, there was a time when, you know, able to find, you know, there was no hip hop on TV. There were very few articles even written about hip hop. And so what I used to do is I used to go to the library, and, you know, they had these things called periodicals, which were basically books that talked about what was in magazines and newspapers through a certain time period. And so I would look for anything that said they did something on hip hop. And because it just wasn't accessible, not, you know, obviously everything's accessible, it's in your pocket now. But in them days, hip hop was barely on the radio, and there was a small station called KPOO, and I grew up in San Francisco, California, and they played certain things, and most of the stuff I heard was from the East Coast. And it wasn't until I think maybe Too Short was the first artist I heard locally that kind of represented where we were from. And I was always, I mean, after I heard Rapper's Delight, and then I was really into hip hop, but I was listening to that in the midst of listening to a lot of like disco funk records, you know, like the Barkays and Lakeside and Rick James and Michael Jackson at the same period. So it was like, I almost treated it like it was just another one of those type records, but somebody was rapping instead of singing. But then as more records started to come out, and then really for me it was The Message that came out in '82 where that changed my life, where I was like, wow, this is really it, you know. And so from then forth I was just like, you know, It was just always something that I gravitated to. But again, it was really hard to find anything about hip hop. And so you just had to search and you know, and the circle of people that were into hip hop was a lot smaller. Like when I was in high school, or when I started high school, I think it was 84, there would be like a couple of kids in school that listened to rap, and we all hung out and listened to hip hop, some breakdance and graffiti artists. But like, it isn't like now where every kid listens to it. It was like maybe a handful, and everyone else was like listening to Prince, you know. And so like, yeah, man, it was a different era.
Have you ever? So you're from the Bay Area, you said, right? Yeah. Have you ever heard of a rapper named Earthquake?
A rapper named Earthquake? No, I haven't.
Okay, never mind. Scratch that question. But so yeah, it's just interesting to me, especially just like, you know, you being a part of Hieroglyphics, and obviously Hieroglyphics taking such a strong influence from the East Coast sound, both lyrically and production wise as well. So what were you guys ever like I know like Earl Sweatshirt. Do you know who Earl Sweatshirt is? Yeah. Earl Sweatshirt, he's got a line where he says, I was too black for the white kids and too white for the black. And did you guys ever like feel like people did you feel like people accepted you on the West Coast even though you guys were rocking with the East Coast sound? Like, was there ever tension there?
Yeah, I think particularly in Oakland, I think there was a little bit of like, oh, we like these guys, but and they're from Oakland, but this isn't Oakland shit. You know what I mean? And so I think there was a feeling that, yeah, you know, it just like we were popular, we were on a major label, and had song 93 Till Infinity at the time, and Dell before that were getting played nationally, and they were getting played in the Bay, but not on a wide range like a lot of local groups who were much smaller, you know. And so I think there was a feel that we were, yeah, like what do they say? You know, we were a little bit out of, you know, the norm in the area. But I think the thing that attracted us together, me and Hyro, is that we were into the same type of hip hop, but not just about East Coast versus West Coast. It's really about you know, having lyrics that are different and progressive and pushing the envelope and not sound like your neighbor's tape or whatever, you know what I mean? And so I think that it really was less about where you were from, but just like we gravitated to the same type of hip hop records. And at the same time, we appreciated Too Short and Digital Underground and other people that were in the Bay bubbling up, because they had elements that we liked too. But, you know, I think that most people, if you're doing good hip hop, you're basically, or at least MC wise, you're basically rhyming about your experiences, right? And so these guys didn't relate to the street, like that's not what appealed to them, so they rapped about different things. Yeah. And so, you know, that's just how it is. And so there were a lot of, as you say, Earl Sweatshirt type of dudes who were like, yeah, we're in this concrete jungle and we're in around the street stuff, it surrounds us, but it isn't necessarily our focus to talk about that. And so, you know, I think the key to good hip hop is being a good hip hop artist or good hip hop producer or anything, is being able to find yourself in the music you do. And like, everyone's influenced by something, but you got to make sure that part of you is expressed in it, and that's what makes it unique. That's what makes it different, because we all have different DNA, we all have different life experiences, and so why waste that by only doing what someone else has done through their DNA and their experiences? Yeah.
So, you know, it's kind of interesting because you guys, you know, were obviously making waves and making a lot of noise like in the early 90s. Coming from the West Coast, I was just wondering, like I hear Hieroglyphics and the Far Side get brought up in the same conversation, but I've never heard of like any overlap. Was there overlap between the crews? Did you guys ever link up?
Oh yeah, they were good friends of ours, like, because we both came out around the same time. And then Souls of Mischief actually did a project, and I think only a 12-inch ever came out, called the Mighty Mighty Monty, what is it called? The Mighty Mighty Pythons? It's like there's a 12-inch out there, and it's basically Souls of Mischief and Farside together doing a song. Mighty Mighty Pythons, I believe is what it's called. And they did a bunch of songs but for a project that never came out. But yeah, we were tight with the Farside. We hung out with them, we toured with them, and came up at pretty much at the same time together. And so yeah, we were close to them.
Right. Yeah.
Still close to them. Right,
yeah, no, it's interesting to hear like just how kind of not similar, but almost like they could have been an extension of Hieroglyphics or vice versa. Like you guys could have all, yeah. Like what do you think is the element that brings out like why is music from the West Coast so weird?
I mean, you'd have to define weird. You know?
Like you watch, there's, I think like what comes to mind is like, I can't remember what exact video, but there's a video by the Farside where they filmed it in reverse, or like, like there's some Souls of Mischief videos where you're not watching a Mobb Deep video, and you're not watching a Mobb Deep video. It's almost like there's more of like a sense of humor. Maybe weird is the wrong term to use. That might be like a little bit disrespectful, but just like crazy or like out there. You know what I mean?
Well, I think a lot of that. I'm not going to speak for the Farside, but for us, I think a lot of it that was derived from like De La, and Del, I know for specifically were Biz Markie. There was a lot of humor in hip hop, and we just didn't take ourselves that serious, at least to the extent that where we felt like everyone needed to be mean mugging. We were able to go and show parts of the Bay Area. We didn't have to just be in the urban setting. You know what I mean? And I think that Farside are unique guys, and I think really it's just that's what I mean when I say express who you are, and it was the Souls. We've all felt like it was, hey, we wanted to be us, you know what I mean? And yeah, it wasn't different. It wasn't the same as our neighbors, but like that was our aim, is to be different and to not kind of add to the culture instead of just regurgitating the same thing that everyone else was doing. I mean, I recall early on, that was one of the main things, like, you got to be different. That was part of a prerequisite of hip hop, where it was like, if you weren't different, motherfuckers would diss you, and that somehow got lost in years of conglomerate companies kind of coming along and packaging it in a certain way, and then only pushing things that they felt were gonna sell best, and negativity, sex and violence. And so, I think, but when we came up, that was part of the thing, is like, you're not gonna do what the next person to do. Me as a producer, like, I used to hook something up, and then if A+ or somebody said, oh, so-and-so used that, I'd be like, scrap. You know what I mean? Like, it mattered that someone used a sample before, And so, like, that's what I mean, and I just think that's the era that we came up from, about being original. That was like almost damn near rule number one.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's a way better way of describing it than weird. I apologize for that. But yeah, but no, I think that's, when I look back on Hieroglyphics and I look at the impact that they've had, it's so beautiful to see like how apparent that element of like just being original and different is, especially just because like you're saying, you sounded so different, and it might not have even been the easiest thing to do that. So big ups to what you guys have been able to do. So what's your favorite song that you've worked on with Hieroglyphics? What are you most proud of?
That's a good question. There's a couple that kind of stand out that I listen to nowadays and am proud of. Like, let's see. I'll say a couple that we do that are done in the show. Like, I really like "Let 'Em Know," which is the first song on 93 Till Infinity that I produced. I like a more recent track, "Tour Stories." I think that's strong. That like, when I mean strong is like, when you're talking about your own stuff, you're probably the hardest judge on it. And there's certain songs that I listen to and I go, man, I like how I did that. You know what I mean? And there's certain songs where I'm like, I wish I could have done this, or I wish they would have did this on it. So I think those are two. I did a remix for Dell to a song, Phony Franchise. It's a Phony Franchise Domino remix that I'm proud of. After Dark, a song on Third Eye Vision that I did is I'm proud of. Yeah, man. There's a few, man. You know, I think that I'm happy with, you know, that my output and what I did. You know, I'm proud of the, you know, most of the stuff that I've done. But those are the ones that come to mind initially.
Hell yeah, man. No, that's awesome. That's a great track record, obviously. So what, like, you know, we do, like I was saying earlier, we do a cypher every week, and it's basically like most of it is just freestyle, and obviously freestyle is like a huge part of Hieroglyphics and Souls of Mischief. So like what you know, I was reading an interview with about Souls of Mischief, and they were talking about how somebody introduced freestyling to them, and it kind of, they said it freed their style. Like, did you notice a change in Hieroglyphics at that time, and what can you say about freestyling?
I think that they were already freestyling before I met them. And to give you a time frame, I met Del first, and he had already recorded I Wish My Brother George Was Here, but it wasn't out. So it was like 90, 91. And so they were already kind of freestyling. And, you know, like I reckon it to jazz. I think the term freestyle has kind of lost its meaning in hip hop. Like, I think nowadays people basically think freestyle is a song that's not on record, you know? Yeah. But to me, freestyle, I've always viewed it as the jazz term of freestyle, which is meaning you come off the top and create in a room with other musicians, right? Yeah. So you're just coming for free, you know. It's not written down. It's just and so that if you ask me what freestyling means, it means that coming off the top of the dome, coming up with words and lyrics as the beat plays right then and there, right? And so, like, those guys were the best I ever heard, you know, and so, you know, it was a big deal, and I feel like when they came out, that was one of the things that differentiated them from other groups, the ability to come off the dome and rap and say something that was still dope, you know. And I recall when we first went to New York, you know, we did the Stretch and Bobbito show, and they basically said, yeah, there's about 5 guys that do it, you know, and it's like Craig G, I remember, was one of them, and Curious George, and us, and there was a few others. I think one of the leaders of the New School, but there's others, like, you know, back in the day, I know that that Busy Bee did a lot of freestyling, so it's not like it's something we made up, but I think that it was just something that they made as like a forefront, a selling point. This is what we're about. And so I thought it was amazing, because I think if you can do something that most other MCs can't do and do it well, that instantly will get people's attention. And I think that helped us along the way to get the respect that has carried us to this day.
Totally, man. You know, it's interesting, because I think you listen to Souls of Mischief, and like the way that they write their songs, it's like the way they break the meter and break like the kind of like consistent, like where you're expecting to hear, you know, the next rhyme come in and the next bar. It's like they'll just switch the rhyme out of nowhere, and I don't know, I'm just like imagining that comes from freestyling.
I would think so, yeah. You know, I think they're creative guys, and you know, I think they're always pushing the envelope, and that's how those things happen.
Did you ever feel like a pressure to match like their energy with the beats, like the chaotic?
Sure. I mean, I don't know if it was pressure. I mean, I felt like I needed to, you know, when you got guys who are that talented, you feel the need that you gotta live up to their standard, you know, and you know, I gotta, because here's a thing. When I met Hyro, I was still dabbling in rapping, right, MCing, but I was kind of moving away from it, right, because I was focused more on beats. But I still officially was rapping. Like, I hadn't stopped at that point. But when I met them, I realized that my rapping wasn't on their level. And so it was easy. I was already kind of moving away from it, but that was kind of easy to kind of like end it. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, okay, because I knew that my beats were on their level. Right. And so I was like, yeah, I think that I can mesh with them. Also because there was no one in Hyro that was just a producer. It was like A Plus and Casual and Dell all produced and made beats, but they rap. But I was the first person to come along who was like, this is all I do, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't think I felt pressure. I just felt like, hey, I felt confident that what I was doing was equal to what they were doing, and that's why it was such a good mix, you know.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, well, you know, like that kind of brings us full circle to why we do this, like, you know. So what do you want to say to the people? What do you want to leave them with? What do you want to say to this next generation of hip hop heads that are coming up?
I mean, the first thing I would say is, you know, do your research about where it started. You know, I'm never one to say this era is better than that era, because I think anyone who's of age, when you're like, you know, 12 to 22, you're always going to think that that's the best era in music. You know what I mean? For the most part. And so, you know, see where it all came from, and then you may realize that you have 50 years of music to pull from, to when you're doing something you take a little bit of everything, but then again, as I said before, you bring what's in yourself to that. And I think you can, you know, you can make music that's going to transcend an era. And that's what, when you talk about a group like Souls of Mischief that's been around 30 years, there's a reason for that, you know. And so I'd say to the youth, like, you know, do you, but see where it all came from. And maybe you might find something that can help put, you know, you can put into something that will make your stuff unique, because it isn't just about one era. Like, I've always listened, like when I listen to music from all eras, you know. I just play my playlist on shuffle sometimes, and just most of the time. Yeah. And it's like it may jump from, you know, Das Effects to John Coltrane to, you know, Minnie Riperton to, you know, maybe even, you know, Led Zeppelin, you know, like all over the place. The Platters, you know, the Beatles for sure. You know, like, and so all this is part of my sound. It isn't just hip hop, it isn't just funk or jazz. All of that is encompassed in the music that I make. The influence from growing, my first influence is the Beatles, because my mom that was her era. And so we listen to a lot of Stevie Wonder, and so all this stuff is inside my creative mind that I pull from, sometimes knowingly and sometimes just subconsciously.
Beautiful, man. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for filling in some of the blanks for me.
Cool. Thank you, man. Thank you. And, you know, spread the word, man. You know, I think the you know, young people like yourself are what's going to keep the culture moving, you know.
I hope so, man. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We'll keep this shit going. Absolutely.